I'm fortunate, I would say, to have the ultimate dream job for any car guy. It all started off, I grew up in Ecuador, in South America, in a small city, well, the third largest city of Ecuador, called Cuenca. But Cuenca in Latin America is probably recognized as like the crib of motocross. So in the 1970s, were kind of in the early 1970s when the first full prep race dirt bikes were starting to be imported. Now they only allowed up to, I think there was barely maybe a few couple 250cc size engine dirt bikes. So it was all mostly 125 and 80cc. So my dad grew up obsessed, watching some of his friends that were able to get some of these bikes. And he always said, as soon as I have a kid, that's the first thing I'm going to do is buy him a dirt bike. So I come along in 1990. I'm born and my dad starts buying me little toy dirt bikes to the point where I remember using his ears as a little throttle and I would make noises while watching races and stuff. So, that automatically started getting me obsessed with motorsports and automobiles and stuff like that. So eventually, once I was able to sit down for a full Formula One race without moving and wanting to do something else, he just started showing me. So I'll sit down, wake up with him at 2, 3 in the morning to watch the Formula One races on the other side of the world, and just became extremely passionate. And then he slowly introduced me into like WEC, World Endurance Racing, Le Mans and stuff like that, which was so neat. So I grew a passion for it, a desire to know the knowledge, the history, the drivers. And I started at a young age, started buying kind of books and VHSs at that time, magazines, posters, and obviously the dream became the F1 once I became aware of what it had done. And, I was born in 1990, so it's the perfect timing for that car to be the ultimate. So by the time I was 6, 7, and kind of had an idea of what the car was, I became obsessed, as well as, the Ferrari 250 LM, the Porsche 917, and that kind of stuff. So during that time, my dad got me into motocross racing a little bit as a young age. And he actually, at one point, sold one of his cars to buy me a dirt bike. He was so obsessed with the fact that, he wasn't able to do that as a young age. He has a son, and why not do that with him? So he would teach me, how to work on my dirt bike, how an engine works, the whole different components of it, the chain, the sprocket, how to tell when it's worn out, how to adjust it. So I became somewhat knowledgeable and experienced with tools and how an engine works and stuff like that. I had lived in the United States for about 3 years during my early childhood, from like the late 1990s into the early 2000s. So during that time, this was in Virginia, I started acquiring these hot book pages where you would subscribe. I think once a week you would get a package of like 10 sheets, and each sheet would open up and give you all kinds of stats, comparisons on different cars, the values at that time, and 0 to 60. So I became obsessed with this as well, and we ended up acquiring, they would send you binders, so I ended up having 2 binders, probably about 70 pages each binder. And I got to the point where I was so obsessed with this, and I would take it to my dad, like, Dad, ask me any questions, I know this, I know that, like, pop quiz me. And I became, pretty knowledgeable on stats and stuff on those types of cars, which was pretty neat. So in 2006, I've moved back to the United States. My dad wanted us to go to college here. And coincidentally, the high school that I joined in Virginia, called Hilton High School, had one of the best automotive programs in the whole country of any high school. So usually the automotive program started sophomore, junior, and senior year. It was 2 periods each year. And I came in my junior year. I didn't know, so I just chose like Italian language, I think, as a extracurricular or something. But a week or so into school, it was brand new. I was in the States. It was a big culture shock. High school, like it was in the movies, with lockers and stuff. So it was a big culture shock to me. And part of that, they took us and showed us the automotive class. And when I walked in, they had a group of students there doing a whole teardown on an engine and reassembling as fast as possible. And that was part of like a competition that they did. So I saw that, and instinctively I was just like, this is me. Like, I need to do this. So immediately I went to our guidance counselor and was like, how can I, like, this is my life, how can I make this happen? And they were like, well, this starts as a sophomore program, and I don't know if we can make this happen because it's 2 periods. So I was like, man, I'll have to make this happen. So I went up to the automotive teacher. His name is Mr. Stevens, which I became really good friends now. I think he saw my passion and my, like, the energy towards this automotive class, that he was like, all right, let's make something up. So I actually dumped all my electives and just took 3 periods of automotive stuff so I could level out, but I still had to do some extra stuff to equal out. But thankfully, I had gained some knowledge throughout my young childhood years with my dad. So I would stay after school and learn with him the first couple of months, and he would teach me this and that and learn how to, start off really simple, of course, just how the electrical system works. And it grew pretty extensively till we started doing engine rebuilds, using, high quality machining, lapping the valves, all kinds of stuff like that. And I would stay after school for about an hour with him until I kind of equalized with, with all the material that he had taught in the sophomore year. So then I started competing for the automotive program and representing our high school, which was really neat. And I traveled with the school teacher. I remember one time I finished the competition and I was like, wow, this is so fun. And I was literally like full of joy. It was so, I really, really enjoyed it. And he was like, this is the first time somebody's ever said that after a competition. Usually people are stressed out, nervous. So I started doing, thankfully, pretty well. It was just, I think, my passion that I just submerged me into it. So throughout that, I also, because I was kind of the best student in that classroom, he got me a job at a Ford, Lincoln, Mitsubishi dealership where I became an apprentice and worked with some of the gentlemen there. And I learned a lot there as well. It was a lot about life, about mechanics. You know, I was growing up, going through my 16, 17 years of age. And then, so I started competing for the school. I won like regionals, which I was at a local college. It was really cool. I still remember the smell of that environment. Then I went to state. And I remember it was in Richmond, Virginia at the museum, Air and Space Museum that they had there. And it was sponsored by Ford AAA. So they had like 10 Ford Escapes and they were all bugged. And then a different part was like you had a brake setup, the electronic, all kinds of different areas like tasks. And so I won that. That got me a partial scholarship to the University of Western Ohio. So I started reading at one of the recruiters came to our school and showed us all, you know, the school has its own track, its own race team, and showing us all this amazing stuff. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. Fast forward a few years, I moved down to Fort Lauderdale with my father. And at that time, I remember I was always obsessed with the Ferrari Dino. That was a car that I was like, as a little kid, really, really obsessed about. So I remember one day when we first moved down, we just went to the beach. And on the way to the beach, I drove past this gallery and it had a purple Ferrari Dino there. You know, I passed it with the traffic and I was new to the city, so I didn't want to stop and like try to go back. So I just went to the beach. And while I was at the beach there, you know, getting to know the area of Fort Lauderdale, I'd never been in Florida before. The car just was in the back of my mind, like, wow, I just saw a purple Ferrari Dino. So on the way back, I was anxious to leave the beach. I don't think I was there for more than 20 minutes. I go back and I stop at this gallery, which is now called Motor Car Gallery. And it was funny. I was in like a tank top, you know, board shorts and in flip-flops. And I walk into this very exclusive high-end gallery, and this gentleman approached me. You know, he's nicely dressed, and we start talking about cars and motorcycles and dirt bikes and stuff. This gentleman ended up hosting a Harris Scramble, which is a form of dirt bike racing through the woods and stuff. And he actually hosted a pretty big event of GNCC at his ranch in Okeechobee. So we clicked right away. We started talking about Niki Lauda and Formula One. He realized my passion and somewhat knowledge. He was like, well, like, what do you do here in Florida? So I just told him I had just moved down here looking for a change. And he was like, well, why don't you come work with us? Like, we need some help in the workshop. So why don't you do that? So then, you know, everything was like, whoa, this just happened. And he kind of saw me dressed, you know, very informal. So he was like, look, come back Monday for an interview, bring your resume, and we'll do a proper formal interview. So that weekend, I was beyond excited. I mean, I walked around a little bit through the gallery, especially after seeing the Dino, and I went back home, and I was just like, Dad, look what happened. This just happened. So I go Monday, interview with the gentleman. He hires me. It all worked out. So once I started working there, you know, I started seeing, because I was always obsessed with all these supercars, but I didn't think people really collected these cars, or like, I honestly didn't know what happened. My mind was like, I wonder where those cars are at now. I just thought, you know, they were amazing cars, and I guess as a kid, I always thought they just disappeared. So then through that, working through them, they take me to a Classic Cavallino track day. And when I get there, I was mind blown. I mean, Preston Hen from Swap Shop had the Ferrari FXX there. He had a LaFerrari. There was, I mean, Ferraris that I had never seen. I remember there was a GT Evoluzione there, and I was just like, walking around. I mean, I had tears coming out of my eyes. Even the people that I worked with at that time were like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, you don't understand. This is insane. Like, I can't believe I'm hearing a 250 Testarossa, which I only had the little die-cast models. Like, I never even seen what 250 Testarossa in video. That opened up an eye to me that there is a world in these kinds of automobiles. Like, people still collect them, drive them. So that started my mind, you know, rolling. And I was like, you know, that was rethought the idea of going to UNOH and really putting my mind to this. So once I saw this, I was like, no, I have to level up and take this to another level. So I reached out to the school, applied, got approved. So I can't remember the date, but I decided to go to UNOH. So it was I remember late December 27th with my dad. We drove up, and I remember we left Florida, tank top, shorts. By the time we got to Ohio, it was snowing. It was miserable. It was so cold. But I got to the school. We toured around the school, and it was just mind blowing. It was amazing. So I joined the school. I'm there for, you know, it was a whole 4-year program. And then halfway through school, my dad was ready to move back to South America. So I fly down for a week to Fort Lauderdale, help him pack up, get ready. And in between that, you know, through my time living in Virginia and stuff, I had always wanted to see an F1. I went to every Cars and Coffee, every car show, every convention center that was related to the automobile. I mean, I chased this car everywhere, never saw one. There's an upscale area near Virginia called Tyson's Corner where I had heard that there was one, McLean, and I never saw one. I chased it everywhere. Saw a lot of Diablos, which are mind-blowing. I remember seeing the first Countach. It was just like so crazy, but I never got to see the F1. Like, but I was, I still had this like, the F1 was calling me. So halfway through school, I come down to Fort Lauderdale to help my dad pack up and move, and something just told me, Google where you could see a McLaren F1. And that was where, I think, right on the time where you could Google stuff and ask it questions, and Revs Institute comes up, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? And then I start looking at the website and the car collection. There's 250 LMs, 917s, some of the most important Grand Prix cars. I'm like, Dad, look at this. Like, what is this place? So we book a ticket, we make an appointment. I think a day or two later we go, and with the entrance, you're able to come in the morning, somewhat stay throughout the whole day. So we go early morning, we get there right as the door opens. We're waiting outside anciently to see this, finally, the McLaren F1. So I walk in, the ladies greet me. We walk into the lobby area, and they're, for my first question is like, where's the McLaren F1? I need to see this car. And they're like, we're so sorry, it's out of the museum, it's not here at the moment. So my heart just like, no. But then I walked into the lobby, and the way the museum has it set up, when you walk into the lobby, there's 3 main cars on this second level that we call it. But I look to the right, and there's a Ferrari 250 LM there, which to me, that's another car. Not as much as F1, but it's a spectacular car. So I see this, and then we start, and then you walk, into the next gallery, and it's the Porsche gallery, and then I see a 356. So I turn around, and then there's a 550-01, the first prototype Porsche ever built, and then I like open, and then I see the whole rest of the gallery, and there's all these plastic supercars. There's a 910, 906, 908, and then the 917 is there. And coincidentally, as a kid, when I was playing with Hot Wheels and stuff, my dad, through this, I think it was through the same magazine where we subscribed for these hot cars, my dad had bought at that time like a $500 model, which was very expensive. And it was, one was the magnesium chassis 917, the number 22, and the other one was the Martini car. And only when I had good grades in my report card or something like that, my dad would be like, yeah, you can play with it under my supervision. So I see this car, and I'm just like, wow, so we walked around, we spent all day there. We went and grabbed a really quick lunch just so we can come right back to the museum and spend the rest of our time there. But I remember leaving there just exhausted of how emotional it was to see each car and the impact. And like, for me, like I said, I thought those cars just ceased to exist. I don't know why that came to my mind, but once I saw that this was here, it was just mind-blowing. And I remember peeking, as you walk around the museum, the workshop is not accessible to the public, but they have a little window like this big that you could peek through. And I remember seeing in there, it was just all white, and the workshop, I mean, it looked like a NASA lab. On the drive back from Naples to Fort Lauderdale, it's probably an hour and a half drive back. I mean, we're just in complete silence, just like kind of looking at our pictures, being like, just like, wow, kind of like we were driving F1. Like, what's going on here? What is life? So I go back, I finished the week off with my dad, and I go back to school, and there I still had about another 2 years of school. Maybe 2 months before I was getting ready to graduate, I started reaching out to a few places. There was a place in Dubai I was interested in working at, possibly in the UK at some Ferrari restoration shops. But the Revs Institute was always in the back of my mind. The gears from all the cars and everything was turning there. So I go on their website. They don't have, Revs Institute at that time didn't have any careers or jobs, anything where you could apply. But they did have a little box that said, do you have any inquiries? And it was limited to, I think it was like 300 either characters or words. But I worked on this for days. I mean, it was a week or so. I was just like so focused on creating just the right message where I was expressing my passion, my knowledge, somewhat knowledge of the cars, and desire just to work there. So I work on this for, like I said, about a week. I have some of my professors look at it, make sure all the grammar is correct, and that, I'm hoping to make some kind of impression. I send it, and I didn't really think nothing of it. I was saying that, we'll see what happens. I was open to anything. And about, I want to say less than a week later, I received an email from the curator's assistant at the museum, vice president. She was like, hey, Pedro, we got your message. I hope all is well. How would you feel about having a call with our vice president / curator? And like everything, I could feel me sweating. It was just like, what's going on? So I obviously get so excited. I couldn't believe that was happening. So I replied to this email, and I'm like, yes, of course, it'd be an absolute pleasure. But this was before ChatGTP, so maybe there's some grammatical errors there. I replied to this email. So we set up, she sent me the phone number to call and everything. And I think it was the following day I had a call with the vice president of the museum at the time. And, I was just like, you know what, I'm going to take it. Obviously, I was nervous. I was kind of playing mind games like, oh, it's going to be nervous. You can't be nervous. Don't do this. It has to be perfect. But I was like, you know what, I'm just going to take like having a passionate car talk with somebody that obviously has a great position in a wonderful museum, and let's just see what happens. So I get on the phone, we have a wonderful conversation, very relaxed, very casual, and I think he felt the emotions and desire for me to work there. So we came, talked a little bit more, and he was like, you know what, how about you come down here, kind of show us what you've done, what you've learned. So I created a whole PowerPoint presentation of everything that I learned at school, from machinery, from theoretical stuff, everything, electronics, all the projects that I've worked at school, the machine, like I said, that I used. And I actually went around the whole school with one of our security guards. I had talked to him about this incredible opportunity, and he was generous enough to where he took me throughout the whole building, let me take pictures of all the projects and machinery without any of the students there. So I was able to create what I thought was impressive PowerPoint to show what I've done and my desire to work there. So I sent them this, I presented it to them, and it worked out great. I think they're impressed with, like I said, my desire, my passion for it. They offered me, they were like, hey, usually we have interns during the summer that come with us to Pebble Beach from McPherson University. And at that time, they had scheduled a gentleman from McPherson University to come to Revs, but something happened in his life where he couldn't attend, and it's crazy how life works. So I just happened to send that message right around the time where he had canceled the internship. They said, finish out school, because I still had some summer classes to do, since I did like 2 degrees. I just took it all year round. So I finished sometime in September, and they're like, it was too late for me to go to Pebble Beach and do Monterey Car Week. So they're like, hey, there's Lime Rock Historics. We're attending a couple cars out there. How about you come out and work with us? And, see how it all works out. So they got me a hotel. I go to Naples, I want to say it was probably on a Tuesday night. I sleep at the hotel, not knowing what to expect. I hadn't met anybody in the workshop or nothing. So I just show up to the museum when they told me to be there for the car service to take us to the airport. And so I get to the museum. It was still dark. It was like 5 a.m. I say hi to all these gentlemen that are working. I'm obviously intimidating. I started reading on some of the guys and the stuff that they had accomplished. One of them being Mr. Dave Clem, who's taught me so much now. And I was just, he created all these Porsches and stuff. And I just remember being in the airport and looking at them being like, wow, these guys are like on a whole nother level. This is amazing, the people I'm getting to work with. So we fly out to Lime Rock. When we get to Lime Rock, we took a Ford GT40 that it was a 1967 car that actually won its class in Daytona with Jackie Ickx. So just knowing that I was going to be working with that car was mind-blowing. But they come and tell me that Richard Atwood is driving our car. So I almost keep it cool, being the first guy to win them all for Porsche in the 917, which is such an iconic car. It was so cool to be able to meet him, realize how humble he is. At that time, I had never created or met any professional drivers or any iconic drivers, heroes of that time. So it was amazing to see how human he was. He wasn't this super person that, untouchable. He was very human, very kind, gave me a hat, signed it. I took pictures with him, and I had a fantastic event with him. The car did great. He ended up winning the races that he drove the GT40 in. And that's when also I met the founder of the Museum of the Revs Institute, Miles Colley. I remember having dinner with him and just being in complete amazement. But it went so well. I got along amazing with everybody. The chemistry was great. So we fly back to Naples after the event was over, and obviously we live in Naples, Florida, so it was hurricane season, and we got to notice actually halfway through the trip that there's this hurricane forming. So we come down to Naples, and they're like, hey, we could use some help moving all these 120 plus cars into a safe part of the museum, and how about you stay with us for another week or so and help us out? So I'm like, of course, you don't have to ask me twice. So they booked me a hotel. I stayed there, and it was amazing being able to move all the cars. And since I was a young, nimble guy, I got to sit and steer most of them, as the rest of the staff kind of pushed me around and directed me where they wanted the cars. So it was such a surreal experience. And finally, after we come back from this Lime Rock event, I finally get to see the McLaren F1, because the morning when we went up to go to the event, I wanted to see it, but the museum was closed. It was 5 a.m. We were all just ready to go into the car service to take us to the airport. But I finally get to see the car, and coincidentally, they were like, you know what? How about we take you for a drive in the car during all this hurricane kind of pre-setup and stuff. So my first car I ever got to ride in the museum as a passenger was the McLaren F1. I had finally seen one, and not even that, but I finally rode in a McLaren F1, which was beyond any of my wildest dreams. I know my dream was just to be able to see the car. So I helped them move all the cars, and it went great. That the hurricane thankfully didn't damage the building. So I come back, we placed the cars back in. And so then I went back to Fort Lauderdale. When they hired me to offer the full-time position, they had to do a background check. And because I'm from Ecuador and lived in a few different states, it took actually a couple months. But I'd make sure that once a week I would call the vice president's assistant, being like, hey, I'm just calling. I hate to be a pain in the butt, but I just want to know what the status. So, I had to make at least 10 or 12 calls once a week for 2 or 3 months, just checking up and being like, hey, what's going on, please? Until finally, around the same time that I actually went to college, just 4 years later, in late December they were like, hey, you're cleared, you're hired, so you want to start January 2nd. So I got on the website, started looking at apartments and rented it. And yeah, I finally started January 2nd, which is an amazing. It's been, I mean, it was so surreal just to be able to know that I was working there. And then, you know, starting as an apprentice, you know, obviously I was very intimidated by the cars and being able to work there and, you know, the machines that we were using in the cars and, you know, everything. It was so cool. And then I, you know, started working under the other technicians that were there. And little by little, you know, started learning, and here we are. It's been an absolute dream. Now I've been at the Revs Institute for close to 8 years, going on 8 years now. And, you know, the first 2 years, you know, I was drooling to drive a car. Obviously, you know, I went for a bunch of rides with many of the mechanics, and it was just amazing to see how each car operated. Also, it was amazing to keep learning about pre-war cars, the history, the archives, and just the whole museum in itself was amazing. It's such an incredible learning experience. You know, they trusted me and allowed me to start breaking off from shadowing everybody and just, you know, starting giving my own projects. And the experiences at Revs Institute have been absolutely amazing.
This month of VINwiki content is brought to you by Bridgestone, and the most exciting news out of Bridgestone is the new release of their Turanza Prestige tire. It is their flagship Grand Touring tire, targeting luxury SUVs, crossovers, and sedans, like a Mercedes S-Class or a BMW X7. And this gives you all the whisper quiet ride that you want in a high-end luxury experience, as well as the wet and dry weather performance that we love from Bridgestone. And you'll get some of the greatest longevity they've ever had on street tires, 70,000-mile limited warranty. So we love Bridgestone for their sports car and supercar tires in the Potenza range. Of course, the Dueler AT Ascent that I've got on my Porsche Cayenne, I absolutely love. But whatever you're looking to find tires for, Bridgestone has something great. So check them out now at the link in the description below to learn more about the Bridgestone family of tires.